and Davidson County, individuals who participate in that either as victims or perpetrators were under the influence of some alcohol or some drug at the time that the accident took place.
You know, I'm glad to hear you bring up the question of substance abuse. On this very program, we've talked on many occasions to many people, from health officials to criminal lawyers and etc., all dealing with the problem of substance abuse. Now, how do you see that in terms of this question of teen violence? I think you've already mentioned some things in reference to it, but what part does it really play in teen violence and some of the other things that we talk about?
Substance abuse plays a very, very large part in it. It's a factor when you couple unemployment, dropping out from school, being in an environment, a living environment that's close proximity to other people. When you couple this with those kinds of things and you add in that element of drug stimulation, which alters the personality, okay? People who normally act and think and would react rationally to situations all of a sudden don't feel like they have to take this from anybody anymore, or it's just a straw that broke the camel's back and they react violently. We have very little control over use. Now, alcohol, in many, many cases by adults, is not abused on a regular basis, but the improper use of it in a certain environment can cause many, many problems. And teaching people to use legal drugs, and I classify alcohol, nicotine, caffeine, also as a drug. Teaching those individuals how to use that is an educational process, as exemplified by our driving, the campaigns that we've had that have been very successful in teaching young people and older adults how to have designated drivers and how to solve the problem and allow them to have their fun also.
You know, it seems that we often talk about some of the causes and consequences and what we're really doing in order to try to meet these problems. But at the same time, when we say that we're having success in cutting down the number of violent crimes and etc., the crime statistics seem to tell us almost the opposite. For example, over the last couple of weeks, we've learned in Nashville that crime has increased over 10 or 12%, and most of these areas, and I think we look throughout the state of Tennessee, and we find that 85% of the deaths in the state of Tennessee are black-on-black crime and etc. And yet and still, we say that we're, in a real sense, we might be winning the war on drugs and on substance abuse. How can that, I mean...
Well, I don't say that. No, we've got individuals who are saying that, but that's not me saying it.
Well, now, what do we do in order to try to win this war?
All right, why don't we use a little common sense here and be realistic, all right? I'm not a politician and I'm not running for public office. I don't have to tell people what they want to hear in order to win votes. All right, history is very clear. We tried prohibition with alcohol many years ago. It failed, all right? We were unable to legislate, okay, people's morality. It's my contention that drugs, and all of them, alcohol or etc., are social and medical problems and are not legal problems. Now, our society and our culture can tell itself that it's going to legislate this morality, and it can spend a lot of money incorporating police and all they want to do, but I don't see any way possible if we've already proved in the 20s that prohibition did not work then. I don't know how it's going to work now, and I think that when we raise ourselves to the consciousness level as a nation, that we can accept the reality that it's a medical and social problem and approach it from those ends, we'll be better off. And Tennessee has made an effort to do this. They've held on to their old-time value, but they've actually put money into education, okay, and into teaching people about drugs so that they can understand, and that's a step forward. When we remove the legal aspect out of it, Our country really has great contradiction as far as drug use is concerned. And let me use something that's not as close to Tennessee, so people won't take it so personally. Let's look at New York City, for example, and the AIDS problem that they had up there. One of the main ways that they pass AIDS on is through the IV needle, the intravenous needle. It's not clean. Well, many people said that if we can pass out clean needles to those people who use drugs, we will cut down on AIDS. But New York was unable to actually do that because of the moral conflict. If we give needles to people who are using drugs, we are condoning or endorsing the use of drugs. Therefore, we will not do this, and we will allow the spread of AIDS and try and find other ways to do it. Eventually, a culture has to become realistic and has to face the truth about itself. One of the worst problems that we have, and one of the reasons we have this drug problem today, and I'll take it right on back to us, in the 50s, in the 40s, I remember my father and other positive black males across the country going to local leaders and saying that we've got drugs coming in our community and we've got a problem. And the powers that be, the United States government itself, hired MDs and PhDs and every other kind of D to come up and say that drug use would only be a problem for the black community, and it would never touch middle-class America, and therefore it was our problem. 30, 40 years later, we see that the people that they hired to tell that lie, that the lie has come back to haunt the entire nation. Now the children of those individuals, middle-class white America, is having to bear the burden of what got its roots in the black community and what we had the wherewithal to do something about. And I think that's one thing that the entire nation must realize, that there's nothing that's going to happen to the black community that doesn't happen to the entire nation. If you ever want to use a measuring rod or a measuring tool or a thermometer to see what was going to come, you can look at the black community. I'm a spiritual person. I don't think God is a fool, and I don't think God is going to allow us to do something that is wrong to one segment of the community and allow that segment who perpetrates that act to go on scot-free without any kind of retribution. And across America, and I'll also point this out, in those days when my father and them were fighting this battle, it was called addiction. When it reached white middle-class America, it became a disease. And you were able to get health insurance to get your children into treatment facilities. Prior to that, there was no health insurance or treatment. Everybody went into public facilities and were imprisoned or treated as criminals. They're no longer criminals, they're diseased individuals. So now, we can continue the hypocrisy if we choose to, but we must look to pay the price for that hypocrisy. And just as the problems of drugs, okay, have come to haunt the entire country, the other problems that are economic and social, which we are seeing manifested in the black community, will creep on up unless we do something about it.
And of course, I would imagine you're talking about the problems of AIDS and other kinds of health problems that are located primarily, that are found throughout the nation, but especially bad in the black community. Mr. Wingfield, let me thank you for giving us that very, very important information, and this historical as well as sociological information dealing with the question of drug abuse in this country and, excuse me, the problems of teen violence. Certainly we had only 30 minutes to do that, but I think that we've given our audience a fairly good idea of some of the major problems that we have in dealing with substance abuse and the connection that substance abuse and teenage violence have. Perhaps if somehow people could be encouraged to listen to what dedicated persons like yourself is saying about these problems, then we might be able to find a real solution and a way out of it all. Again, let me encourage you to tune in again next time for another informative edition of Comments. And finally, if you have any comments that you'd like for us to discuss during this time, then let us know. Good night.